Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, the most important 90 minutes of your day. Hello, I'm Michael, the MC and Opportunity Ambassador, and today's show is The War on Loving Relationships. And with me today is my fellow host, Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator. You can
Hello.
say something?
Hi.
Very
Hello.
good.
Sorry. I was very clamped there for a minute. I was already in the war on loving relationships.
Willow, our trauma consultant.
Hi, everyone.
And Dennis, our freedom facilitator.
Hey, blessed love, everybody. Glad to be here. Is it the war or is it their war? It's not mine.
Well,
the war.
It's not mine.
Maybe it could be their war.
That was we had a back and forth on the title there for a bit, but I went with their war.
If we say their war, we have to define they, which is a whole different episode.
That's a good point.
That's true. Do we want to mention the change in format? And maybe there's obviously for those of you that were tuning in for our other guests, they had a little bit of issues, and we're just going to have to reschedule for a different time, unfortunately. So sorry about that, folks, but we're going to continue on. So
it was
with
something
that said,
with a keyboard and a glass of water that jumped out and into the keyboard, swimming like a mermaid through the keys, disabling the device.
Apparently happen. So there's quite a bit of evidence that there is a war going on, and it is targeting relationships. And if we look over the last 40, 50, 60, 70 years, certainly in a lot of the books about propaganda and some of the think tanks and so forth, there's definitely been a lot of evidence to suggest that family cohesion and community cohesion has dropped dramatically over that period of time.
What is that? Community cohesion. Can you speak English?
I'm trying.
There's not a lot of people who understand what that means. Like, that's kind of the point, is a lot of people are probably going, community cohesion, what are you talking about? What is this magical thing?
It is a magical thing. But yeah, I was thinking about thinking through the different aspects of the war on loving relationships and how it shows up in our, we can talk about theory and cohesion of self with the outside world, or cohesion of the community with each other. But what if we actually talked about where it actually shows up in our life, where we face it, bump up our heads against it as we walk through the day-to-day?
Well, I think that happens everywhere, because that's, like the level of trust that people have, for example, right? Amongst each other in their loving relationships and everything else, their working relationships. There's a great deal of lost trust.
I just want to say welcome to our lovely listeners, Tony McCurdy, the mysterious W, and whoever else may be listening on the other platforms. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
We love you too. Tony says he's been watching the replays lately, and it's just not the same as being here with us live, because we don't say hi, Tony.
Great. Well, glad you could do that. All right. So, what about trust? Where do you guys see a situation in your lives where trust is falling apart? Willow?
Well, the first part of your question, I had an answer. Where it is in my life, at this current time, I can't see exactly how it's affected me, but at a different period of my life, specifically when I was a child, the trust is broken as a child. We are taught not to trust ourselves, not to trust that we will tell the truth, that we will be honest, that we will try our best, that we know when our bodies are feeling sick and when they are fine or when they're full. There's a whole bunch of parenting techniques out there that break the trust between you and your child. And I think that is one of the foundational points, because if you don't know how to trust yourself, you don't know how to trust other people. And you either don't trust anyone or you trust everyone. And both are equally as damaging to your relationships and your connectedness in your social network.
All right, so like parent-child relationships, for example. So the parent takes their child to some school and drops them off.
Oh, it starts with daycare.
Essentially, they're...
No, actually, okay, I think it even starts before that, because
the doctors and the
male circumcision. I mean, a child, an infant, doesn't really know that they trust you, but they have to. They have to trust that you're going to respond to them. And one of the first experiences for young, men is being strapped down and having part of your body cut away. And the response to that is gone unheard, because it is prevalent in our society that this is a good thing, that this is helpful and beneficial and what you need to do. And there's a fine line between someone who does something that they know is wrong and someone who has been misled and misguided their entire life and been led to continue these choices.
But it's almost like we have a rigged system. So it doesn't just go there, but there's also, maybe we shouldn't go too deep into the whole medication and style of medicating children, but there is a great push to follow a specific style of medicating that maybe doesn't necessarily contribute to the trust that the parent and the child have with each other. Right?
Absolutely.
Taking children to the hospital, the way our hospitals are set up, the way, the parents are separated from the children, often maybe don't even have the ability to make the decisions for their child because there's some greater thing at play. The availability, what types of care there are available in the medical system is also limited to the allopathic system. So there's not really, it's not as available or as possible for somebody to actually explore different avenues and try different things.
And just touching on, go ahead.
So I'm a little confused. In a few minutes, we went from community cohesion to male circumcision to trust and to a bunch of other stuff. So I'm all over the place.
We're not done yet.
I'm sure
we're not done yet because now we're going to politics. No, okay.
I know. I'm sure. Like it's all in line with things. So I just have to get my mind around a little bit. And for me, like if war on loving relationships is like, okay, war. What is war? What's relationships? And why would somebody wage war on relationships?
And who's doing it? Who is doing the action? Is it you or is it somebody else? No, sorry. I have
an excellent quote to answer Dennis's question, and I apologize, but it comes from Harry Potter. So there's a scene where Harry Potter is getting some advice from his friend Luna Lovegood, and she says, "If I were the Dark Lord, I'd want you exactly where you are right now. I'd want you separated from your friends. I'd want you to have no one in the world to turn to, because when you're alone, you're not that scary." And I think that's why there would be a war on relationships, because when you are connected, I've not witnessed personally, but I've witnessed this through doing research. Children who have loving relationships can recognize bullshit really easy. They can recognize when you're just trying to be like, "Oh, honey, I love your hair. Do you want to come see these puppies in my van?" They're like, "No, hell no. Why would I? Just because you said you like my hair? I'm not that desperate for attention." Jeez. They can sense it. The more connected you are with your family, your friends, your community, and you know where you stand, the harder it is to manipulate you and control you and turn you into a victim.
Right, but if you're scared and you feel alienated from the people around you, any amount of affection or attention could seem lucrative, you know, like, oh, I don't have this at home. And it's never about the puppies or the chocolate. It's about the individual attention of the adult. That is suddenly an adult is paying attention to me or reaching out to me or, you know, but the child needs to feel alienated for that to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Did you guys see the videos of the guy going around on a playground, like, you know, doing the experiment basically and luring children into his van and around the corner? Like, it's like some real life experiments where you have a guy who's going to a children's playground and the children are just a few feet away from the mommy or from the daddy. And he gets, like, I wouldn't say everyone, but like a whole lot of them.
Quite a bit.
Come with them, go around the corner and gone. And
I've seen that.
Confront the mommy and the daddy, and I think it's on YouTube somewhere too. I've
seen that, and I thought it was hilarious because the guy goes up to the parents and he says, "This is what I'm doing. I would like to see if your child is susceptible to being taken away like that." And so they get the parents' permission, and almost every single time the parent is like, "No, my little Susie, my little Jack, they know better. They know. They're okay." And it's just so easy. Mm-hmm. He does. And it, you know, it's a really scary situation because that man is trying to make a point in a safe way, but he is pointing out something that is really dangerous and really scary.
But what if he's really like a good psychologist and he can see that woundedness in the parent-child relationship? And, you know, it may not even be the parent's fault, right? It may not even be the parent's fault. The parent may not have had the right imprinting in their childhood. So they may not even be able to provide that elusive thing that we're talking about.
You know, the difference, I think the social environment and the culture of the place, it seemed, I don't know exactly where it was, but it seemed to be some, I guess, like developed country, some first world place. But if you would pull that thing off in a different area of the world, then people are, let's say like some places I've seen in Brazil or in Jamaica, like somebody trying to pull that off, it's not going to go down that easy and that fast. And that's, and part of the reason I would just say my subjective opinion is that stuff like that happens a lot there. So people, even the very little ones, are accustomed to seeing and hearing about that, and it's a whole different, it's not something, you know, you might see on TV and mommy and daddy told you once, but you know, you actually experienced like that stuff happening like from early on, and you know, like real life, and you have lost friends or family members, you know, have experienced that kind of stuff and worse things. So that's why the awareness is super high there.
But what if our society actually worked on shifting that responsibility from individual to group, right? What if we all worked together? What if we all looked out for each other? I know that we went through the 1980s, which was the ultimate individuation era, and everybody just looked out for number one. But it's been several years. We could soften a little more.
What I'm thinking of is, like, if you live in an area where this is prominent, it doesn't even matter what kind of abuse it is. It could be, sexual abuse. It could be just robbing people, whatever. You grow accustomed to it in the way that you know what it looks like. And once you put that label on it, you can't unsee it. You see the behavior and you get that weird feeling and you're like, no, there's something wrong about this situation. Whereas right now, I think that the majority of the population has been so disoriented for so long, they don't know what a loving relationship is. They can't tell the difference. And there's so much of this, just sweep it under the rug. Let's not talk about the bad things that our family members, like, that have happened in our families or with people close to us, because we don't want to rock the boat. It makes it even harder to recognize what real manipulative, like malicious manipulative tactics look like.
I think you hit upon something right there. Why not define for a moment what a loving relationship itself actually is, and where we can find that in our personal lives, in our broader community. That's where Mike, you started out with, and take it from there. Because once we have established what a loving relationship is, maybe we discover what you just hinted upon, Willow, that there is actually like a lack thereof. So that itself, has considerably shifted, I believe. All of us noticed in even in our own lifetime. So when I think of a loving relationship, like first thing, that's like family. Okay, like family relationships, that would be the first thing that comes to my mind. Then you have, friends, you have close friends, then you have, people that feel or become like family, like, they're not blood, but they still become like your family over the years. And then what about those other relationships, like, with teachers or with guides or people that heavily influence you, but, is that, what's the difference to, is it still a loving relationship or is it a professional relationship? Like, where's the difference there?
I have a question, because I think we might be looking at it in the wrong way. The terms that you're using are very vague. A family relationship, a professional relationship, a friend that becomes family. Those don't describe the feeling. There's a common feeling between all of these. Like, I've had a teacher who respected me as a person, wanted to hear what I was interested in, was willing to tell me when they disagreed with me, but in a kind way. And I often didn't get that in a family relationship. So just because it's a family relationship doesn't mean it's a loving one. I think we need to be very clear on how we define what is a loving relationship. And it's not just a simple label like my family member is a loving relationship.
Sure, that's why I said for me. So I was speaking for me, that I wasn't generalizing.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever saw or heard or watched the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
I have not.
It's made in, I think, 1940 or 1941.
Is that the Christmas
44.
Is that the Christmas one?
Yeah, the Christmas movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did watch it.
It essentially tells his life, but he's, he works for the pharmacy. He works for the town pharmacist, and, but everybody in the town knows who he is. He knows everybody in the town. There's all these defined, established relationships, and there is a demonstration of care and concern for each other. And that's really the whole thing about the movie, is this idea that if you have friends, if you have a network, an association of people that you take care of, they will take care of you when the time comes,
And that's a great example.
Like it's a beautiful story.
It plays out that's worth money, and basically, everything else is taken care of because he has that loving relationship with pretty much everybody around him, right?
Yeah, and he doesn't realize it. That's kind of the gist of the story. But he does come back to realize, that when I take care of people, they will take care of me. And that's a beautiful thing, but that's 1940s, 1930s era of the United States. That was believable back then. That's no longer believable now.
So what happened in between?
So Tony, our listener, wrote this little couple sentences here, and I think it's very relevant. Humanity would be an unstoppable force if people would stop turning the other cheek and care about the well-being of others. Greed and self have consumed so many. Traumatizing with indoctrination is a major part of the blind mind. Very well put, Tony. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, trauma-based mind control certainly is part of all of our upbringing, I will dare to say. And it's prevalent, like, you just need to step out of your house, or you just need to turn on one of those screens and you'll be exposed to it. If you don't watch yourself, you're under it 24/7.
Even if you try not to watch it, you'll be exposed to it. They actually break through regular, apps. You're trying to check the weather or something. There's drama right there in your face.
In your daily relationship, you're exposed to it because the people around you have been exposed to it. Like the generation that came before you, they're passing it on even unwillingly too.
And I noticed a trend of this. I was actually really disturbed because I loved Disney movies. I was obsessed with all the Disney movies. And when I realized that there was some sexual abuse in my past, I started rewatching a lot of the old Disney movies that I was really into at that age. And I started noticing there's a lot of cues, like references in there to where...
Hunchback of Notre Dame? That was gross.
I was thinking about actually The Brave Little Toaster. I know that's not. I don't think that's a Disney, but someone told me. I have a friend who we like to analyze things in a really morbid way. So someone told her that it was a analogy for child sex trafficking, and when I watched it, I noticed more of those cues where it's like that person's having a reaction as if they had experienced the trauma that you're referring to. It's not a normal response. And then as I watched more Disney movies, I realized it's almost like the Disney movies became a friend that understood all the trauma that I was going through, and they were there for me. And I thought that was really creepy as an adult. Like, I was like, okay, this is not, there's clearly either a history of abusive like tactics, and so that's where they're relating to it, or they're actually trying to relate to children on a like abused sort of level where they're trying to relate to them as if they have been abused and become the friend that understands that. And that's a really powerful tactic. Really.
There's some really great and detailed analysis of those movies and even others furthermore, like on that the website I shared earlier with you guys, Vigilant Citizen, which I think is a great resource for that, from music videos to, and specifically Disney as well. And I was a few years back, I came across those two, and there's like some certain sequences in some of the Disney movies and some of the cartoon movies as well, which is like, wow, you know, like if you don't look for it, you won't see it. But then supposedly, like us, you know, subconsciously you're taking in stuff that you don't even want to take in, and then that's Definitely. That's a whole different level.
Yeah, just like the comic books, all the superheroes, all their parents. I mean, every single one of the superheroes has got their parents are dead, their parents are disappeared, the parents have left them for, you know, it's amazing if you look into that, how across the board that is. So
that is a really common. That is a really common trope for literature and film, because one of the more basic innocent reasons is when you're writing a story, it's much easier to write your story with the main character as an orphan. One, it adds a little extra drama, and it keeps you from having to create a backstory and two other characters that you don't have to make.
That sounds like a bit of an excuse.
Especially if it's all
could
over.
Be a potentially heavy duty.
But hang on. So
psychological impact.
So the war on loving relationships, it shows up in TV, in Disney, in the avenues of mind control, right? Programming where we are programmed to behave in a certain way and respond in a certain way. And certainly, you know, as a teenager, I wondered why so many girls fall for being, I don't know, abused, I guess, talked down to, roughed up, pushed against their will by the boys, and they liked it, or they seemed like they liked it. Oh yeah, I like it when he tells me what to do. It makes me feel so weak and vulnerable. But that is also TV programming. When I, as an adult, when I rewatched a lot of the movies that we watched in the 80s and 90s, it was really like, you know, be a weak woman, even if you're in a position of power, wear high heels so you can't run fast. You know what I mean? So, and that shows up in many other industries as well.
So who would benefit from waging war on loving relationships, really? It's like somebody doesn't go to war without having, you know, some kind of benefit, you know, in sight. So what would be the benefit?
Certainly like what Willow mentioned, the idea that you know, you're easily deceived when you don't have the family connections and that in the relationship that, you know, essentially you know, demonstrates value to you. You're easily deceived by like money and other ways of getting attention. And so, you know, that's certainly one. I don't know. Willow, you got anything else?
Well, it's definitely easier to control you when you're in survival mode, because you're not thinking rationally. You're not thinking you're thinking rationally, but you're not thinking logically. You're not thinking in the present situation. But I think the more important part is individuals are so much more powerful when they have their support system, when they're connected to people. Because when they're connected to people, they can see what is going on and they can tell other people. So
even on an emotional and a mental level, right? Not just
emotional stability is what I was going to say.
Yeah, well, look at it from a tribal like point of view. You know, like if it's just you individually and somebody knocks on your door and is ready to take you away or do whatever, and you have no loving relationship, you have nobody who's looking out for you, whom you relate to, you know, anything more than, I don't know, you're the guy that brings you pizza once per week, then, you know, there's nobody going to stand up for you. Whereas if you have a family, a proper family, you know, with loving relationships or your friends and your community around you, then, you know, somebody will have to think twice, like before, you know, they make a move towards you, because, you know, one shout or one phone call and you have a bunch of people there asking what's going on. So that it's so much more easy to, you know, to being taken advantage of as well if you don't have loving relationships, if you're not rooted within your community.
And all predators go after unarmed prey. You've seen the picture of the lion and the porcupine, right? When, you know, there's the lion and it's eating the gazelle and it's like clearly unarmed. You know, it didn't have the strength to fight back. But then there's this porcupine just sitting there with all of its spines out, just sitting there. And the lion is just sitting there too, because the lion's like, well, if I take a bite out of this thing, that's gonna really suck really bad. So I think it's predators. I can't exactly say like who the they is, because they've made it very, very difficult. They've hidden themselves.
So the mysterious WW had put forth a definition that is also an acronym, which makes it easy to remember. And what he says that they stands for is the hierarchy is enslaving you.
That's a way to put it still.
So
what did
however you want to take that.
What did a famous man from Jamaica sing in one of his songs? We're not here to fight the flesh, but spiritual wickedness in high and low places.
Spiritual wickedness. When you first said famous man from Jamaica, I thought Dennis Eckert, and then I'm like, no.
Who is that?
No.
Sounds like he's a good-looking guy.
The other guy.
I apologize. I got totally distracted because as soon as you said in high and low places, the George Strait song, I've got friends in low places, started playing through my head. I was like, I don't think that's helpful.
Well, the mystery of our brain.
But they're not really hidden these days again. I mean, they're pretty much out of the box, are they? There's always the guys who are not like on TV screen and whose names you don't like, you know, they won't appear so, but you can pretty much see what they're up to, and they're not like really hiding their agenda and what they're up to. That's really fairly easy to see for everyone.
I feel like they're hiding in plain sight, though. It's like they're
but that's
walking
what I
around.
wanted to say. Water is another aspect of war and loving relationships, because, well, and even our consumption of wheat, because all of those things slow down, like drinking and washing yourself in chlorine and sometimes fluoride and chloramine, which cannot be evaporated from the water. Chlorine can be evaporated. Chloramine, when they put chloramine in the water, there's nothing you can do to get it out. I mean, there are some filters, but just in general, in the kitchen situation, you know, you have to have a special filter. And that is constantly permeating our brain, you know, that, and then the chemicals that are used for wheat. I mean, that's slowing you down. Every time you have a hamburger or every time you have some wheat. I was just talking about, I mean, I still do. Don't get me wrong. I'm still like leaning in that direction. But every time I have some wheat now, I remember or realize that it's actually slowing down my brain. It's designed to slow down your brain. It has so much, you know, it's so many reasons. Another whole episode we could be doing on wheat.
I wanted to touch, I don't want to go into like the effects of sugar or, you know, the actual sugar. I just want to touch on the fact that sugar is used in the same way that you were talking about, like wheat and
all right, to dumb you down,
stuff in your water. I found it very interesting how there's two birds killed with one stone here. They threw the sugar into families, made it a part of the health concerns. Like if you eat too many eggs, you're gonna die. You don't want to die because you love your family, right?
Eat the sugar. So why don't
snack. You eat this this heart healthy treat that's got a shit ton of sugar in it. Let me get your kids addicted to it. Like they create the same problems that we're trying to find solutions to, and then they keep offering solutions that are even worse. So they're attacking like inside your home. They're trying to decide what you should eat, what you should drink, where you should live, like what you should do with your neighbors, how you should parent your children. One of the biggest things on like the influencing how you should parent your children, the peer pressure around spanking your children is awful. I have a friend, not a very close friend, but we've talked on numerous occasions, and she is trying to bring peaceful parenting to Christian households. And I thought that was a wonderful thing because a lot of religious households are very authoritarian and it's not helpful. So she was talking about how, lost my train of thought, I tried.
But then, I'll continue. So then, becomes a pendulum effect when you try to eliminate all sorts of physical communication from the family. You can eliminate too much, and I think that's where you were going with it. Because spanking at a certain age can give a child a quick message, not spanking so that it'll hurt, but like a tap on the diaper can give a child a clear message: this yes, this no. Whereas, hitting so that it hurts, that's a whole other situation.
The studies actually say that studies that were made on spanking, they defined spanking not as bruising or as literally, hitting hard, but the spank was that, it was a tap, and it still had all those hugely negative, from early school dropout to like less loving relationships to like dozens of other effects, and they define spanking actually as just a little slap. And it was still perceived as something that, would
affect the children negatively.
Because the child's brain doesn't understand that was just a tap. All they see is, you just hit me. My loved one just hit me. And then often they're not allowed to have the reaction of being upset about just being hit. No one addresses that reaction. They only address, well, if you hadn't have been so bad, I wouldn't have had to spank you.
It's going right back to trust, what Mike started out with, right in the beginning. It's a break of trust right there. Even if it doesn't hurt, or if it's not perceived as a physical harm right away, but something, is broken right there.
I remember what I was going to say earlier about my friend. She had her youngest son was having some issues. And they were at church, and everyone kept telling her, you better just take that boy outside and spank him. Like, everyone. And she's like, I've tried the spanking. It doesn't work. It makes it worse. But everyone just kept telling her, oh, you just needed to go out there and beat it out of him, basically. And I'm like, how does this peer pressure affect your own trust in yourself? Like, these social standards are affecting how you know what is wrong or right in your own family.
You see, one of the reactions of spanking is immediate compliance. And if you look at nature, if you look at, the fox mother with the fox, cubs, and one of them doesn't go in the hole when the mother say go in the hole, then what the animal is going to do is give it a bite. It's not like a deadly bite, but it bites it, and it's the reaction of it is like immediate compliance. So if it's like a life and death, or like a possibly, like a behavior, like whatever, there's a truck coming on the road and, your child is not going back or stepping back, and you have to, grab him by the shoulder hard and pull him back or something like that, then, that physical moment right there. So you need the immediate compliance in order to survive, basically. And for the fox, it's like a survival mechanism that has to be trained. When the mother say go in the hole, then go in the hole, because it might be for something, a life and death situation. So I believe nature is actually like indicating or is showing, or if you look at the animal world also, you can sometimes see when things make sense. But like the way, how we perceive spanking and trying to, to let people relate to something that happened, like maybe even moments before, or like half an hour before, a day before. You take them outside, and then it's a different setting, and then there's no association again with what they would have perceived as done wrong, or they might even not know what they did wrong, but they get the spanking for it. Sorry, Mike.
Well, I was going to say, in regard to like animals and stuff like that, look at how people treat their pets, and like dogs, for example. They lock them up in their yard, they lock them up in their house. There's all kinds of mistreatment that goes on because they've got these things to comply with, and then you go down to a place like Mexico, people let their dogs run around. The dogs are friendly as hell. The dogs up in the the westernized world, where they got the leash laws, they're like insane. So I mean, I think there's something similar going on there, where you're essentially kind of creating a artificial environment, which is creating the circumstance that there's conflict, and there's trauma, and there's heartache and suffering because of some law or some rule that nobody has really agreed to. It's just, well, you do it or else.
I think the dogs are put in a situation, like especially in our urban first world areas, where it's way too many, like on very little space. So they, they must get mad when they go outside, and then they smell, 3 dozen different dogs that just went around the block, just like them. So that's not like a natural environment for them. So, and then plus the fact that they're locked into their homes like most of the day.
I wanted to touch on the fact that like there's plenty of people who are okay pet owners. I was one of them. And I changed because I realized I had a dog that was legit stubborn. Most dogs are not stubborn. First, they have to understand what you want, and then they have to refuse. Most dogs don't do that. Most dogs are just like, I want what I want, and I'll get what I want. It caused a lot of heartache. I had a whippet. He likes to chase cats. There's no getting that out of him. I hate it. I hate the fact that I couldn't have a cat. Couldn't get anywhere near him, or he'd attack it. He'd chase him out of our yard. So I had to create a time where he could go chase cats. If it was in his yard, I made a deal with him. He could chase that cat out of our yard. Once it's on the other side of the fence, you're done. Stop barking. Enough. We're going to go inside. Those are the expectations. But I had to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, I own a dog that likes to chase cats. He likes to chase things. And I'm going to have to let him chase things and be a dog, even if it's annoying. So we work together. And that's actually when I started, by the end of it, I could ask him, do you need to go potty? And he wouldn't bark at me. I'd say, do you want to go outside? He'd bark at me. He wants to go chase cats. He knew the difference, but it wasn't until, like, he had this little growl. I called it his inside voice. And I'd ask him, if you want to go outside, you give me your inside voice, and we'll go right outside. And it was trust. You give me that voice, and I'm up and I'm going. And he eventually started communicating with me on a certain level, and it made our entire household easier. I had a conversation with another client of mine who their dogs like to get out of the fence and run. And they've realized that once they get out of the fence, they will lure them back inside with a treat. So sometimes they'll just go outside and sit outside the gate. And I've had to tell one of my clients, because he will say, oh, well, you just don't get a treat because you ran outside. I said, no, that means that next time he runs outside, he's not going to trust that you have that treat. He's going to run away and go find someone else who has a treat. You can't just deny these things that other people need and want because they're inconvenient.
Loving relationship with animals. That's Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah, Wednesday is going to be about pets.
As a matter of fact,
yes.
yes.
But I do have a loving relationship like that with my dog, and she tells me when she's hungry and when she's thirsty, different things, when she wants to go outside, when she hears something outside and she wants to protect me by going outside. No. Shambhavi said some really cool stuff.
That is a perfect example, of essentially caring enough about the animal to listen to it, to spend the time to understand what the signs are, to figure out how they communicate with you. Those are all really positive things. And if you can do that with an animal, you can probably do that with a human.
But you know what? It's interesting.
But go ahead.
Okay, I have to say something very interesting here because you said that. I had a parrot, and I had that parrot for 20 years before she died through an unfortunate accident. So when I first got her, I was not working for the summer. I had the summer off. So I spent the whole month with the parrot, and I trained her every day. Like, I literally, every time I spent time with her, I trained her. I trained her to go up and down the stairs. I trained her to do things. I talked to her. I explained what was acceptable, what was not acceptable, what you could do, what you couldn't do. After that month, I never had to do anything. For 20 years, I never had to do anything. The parrot would tell me when it was hungry, when it was thirsty, when its water was dirty, when it wanted my attention, when its head was itchy and I needed to scratch right there where she couldn't reach. She had all of this done. So for 30 days, I really paid a lot of attention and worked a lot with the parrot. And, even if you don't stay at home all day, you can still do it for 30 days. And that's it. Never again. It was super easy for the rest of the time. But if you don't spend that first 30 days and really focus on building the relationship, are we getting off topic now with loving relationships?
A little bit, but I was going to bring it back.
I think that's actually on top of it.
It's how to build loving relationships, right? Are you saying that with young children we should dedicate more time? What Shambhavi
say? Yes.
What did Shambhavi say? Are you watching Facebook?
Me? No.
Oh, well then you can't read us what Shambhavi said.
I can't.
I thought you just said Shambhavi was commenting.
I will. I wanted to share the joy. She said that she thinks it's all Dr. Spock's fault. She said, I think today's liberal conditions started from Dr. Spock, and discipline is necessary. And she also said that if you look at enlightened masters, they all imposed disciplinary acts.
So are we saying physical discipline, like actual punishment?
I don't know, Shambhavi. Dare to elaborate or care to elaborate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. We will have to define discipline, because if you go to Jamaica and somebody says, I got discipline you, then that doesn't necessarily mean what discipline means in regular English, I would say. But
I kind of wanted to take the conversation back a little bit to the pets and correlate that into the war on loving relationships with humans.
All right.
So my dog passed away from a tumor on his heart. So he had a heart attack, cardiac arrest in our house. And I noticed this tumor had grown quite a bit since the last year or so, when I was forced to get him shots. A bunch of them. And then I lost his shot records, and they told me that it was fine, it would be okay, and they give him more shots, and that would be fine. Come to find out, after he died, I looked up the symptoms of vaccine overdose, and one of them was tumors, specifically where he had them. And I felt so awful, because I know my only intention was, I noticed there was something wrong with my dog, and I had to take him in, and I had to get him tested. I had to figure out what was going on because he was suffering. And come to find out, me taking the dog to the fucking doctor probably made it worse. I could have had, who knows? I could have had 10 more minutes with him. I could have had 5 more years. Who knows? But in my heart, I knew that I could never get vaccines for another dog again. And I was going to have to figure that out, because You go anywhere in a city and they ask for vaccines. And then I started thinking about how this happens to children. Children are taken into the doctors. They're put on medications. They have shots put into them. And parents don't necessarily, they have a choice, but they don't know that they have a choice. And so there's that trusting relationship, like, where you end up putting people you love in situations that are dangerous because you're listening to what the media is telling you, or what, you know, your city laws are telling you. You can't have this dog unless it has its shots. Your child can't go to school unless it's got its shots. Like, there's a lot of societal standards that are expected of us as humans that literally go against everything, like our actual autonomy. Patrick Smith talked about this with his daughter, Dagny, about how she has leukemia and she had to go and get her shots. And every single time they wait until she says, all right, put the shot in me, you know, because it's awful to try and force a child into a situation that they don't understand, they're scared, and they're not able to make the choice. That breaks so much trust. And so many children have to go through this on a day-to-day basis without even having like leukemia. Like, they go in on a regular basis and are put in these situations.
So are you implying?
I was just going to say vaccinations were up in the 100 range now, right? So, I mean, it's quite a bit of potential trauma there.
And even,
guys, are you implying that forced vaccinations are part of the war against loving relationships?
I'm implying that forced anything, like, I hesitate to say forced because it's not just forced, it's violating. Like, it is violating. It's not just using force.
So we talked about that with Eric, and the word violence means rape. So to be violent towards somebody else is to rape them.
To be violated.
But but to rape them, not necessarily with like a sexual, but it could be, you know, lying to somebody could be raping them.
Well, it is an act of physical harm by definition.
But even like, let's say we don't even want to say it. Let's say vaccines isn't your thing. You could care less. All right. Let's talk about the practice of telling children, oh, if you bring a toy to the sandbox, you need to hand that toy over to the next kid who wants to play with it because they asked for you to share it.
Not anymore.
It's not theirs. It's your kid's toy. He's allowed to say whether he wants to give it up to someone else or not. And like, this dismissal of children's feelings and experiences, I think it's like the foundation. It leads to adults who are lacking.
And they don't look out for each other.
No, because they have to look out for themselves.
There's value in building a loving relationship with your child, and therefore with the future generation to come, in respecting their consent to things, whether it's their toys or, you know, medical issues or God knows what. But to force anyone to do things against their will, there is a problem.
I think consent is a huge issue that it's a important aspect of interactions that we are lacking. We are taught non-consensual relationships from the moment we are born.
What about some of the traditions that most children go through, like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or some of these others? Is it possible that they're kind of creating these expectations that the parents can't deliver on? You know, like the movies show the kids getting all the toys from Santa, and in real life, you might get one toy or maybe no toys. And so my parents, you know, so like the child gets the impression that they're being
singled out.
Like, singled out, or
I don't get
just
it, but everybody
deprived.
else gets it. Deprived, yeah.
Or even worse, Santa Claus is used as a huge parenting manipulation tool. Well, if you're not good, I'm sickened. Every Christmas, I see the same post go around where it's like, you know what? Wrap up a bunch of empty boxes. Every time your kid misbehaves, toss one in the fireplace. And I'm like, that's funny. Like, it's funny when you're thinking about it, but you're also teaching them that if you're good, you get things. And if you're bad, you get things taken away.
Well, and also it's kind
Nothing
of
is
cruel.
really yours.
Your kid's probably imagining that it's that toy that they've waited for 10 years. Probably isn't, because it usually isn't, but let's say it is. And the kid thinks it is, and then it's like yeah.
Yeah, that's super traumatic.
And what about the kid? What about the kid who goes to school and fully, wholeheartedly believes if they are good, Santa will bring them all the things that TV says that he will. And they're satisfied with their Christmas. They're like, man, I had an awesome Christmas. And then they go to their friend's house and they're like, Santa brought you
a car?
A pony? Like, was I not good enough?
To me, it has been a different journey. Like I can relate to the examples that you're giving from a point of like a TV thing. So, and I was exposed to a small degree to that as well. But for me, and I mean, I would have to give credit to my family. But you know, there were presents, and there was the kind of story. We don't have Santa Claus, but we have the Christkind, which is the Christ child, which is a different thing in my region. But anyway, we have that figure there as well, and it's something, you know, like it's a tradition really, and it's something really, it's magical. So there's a magical flair, and there's, you know, for smaller children, you know, so it's a story, yeah. But at the same time, I can look back now at my childhood and I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate the kind of magic of the season. And, you know, the setting up, and it wasn't really all about the material things. So that was a nice part, obviously, especially for children. That's super exciting. But I don't think I ever get it like, you know, you would explain it like, no, like how it's portrayed on TV, and then, you know, TV series and movies build expectations of stuff that might not come or whatever. But it was really, and that's credit to my family, because they set it up in a way that, you know, what was really important was that the family got together, and that, you know, everybody sits together, and, you know, we spend, you know, 2 days with grandparents before, and then, you know, it was a tradition. It was like a ritual thing, and presence was nice. So, you know, obviously I won't deny that, and it was important for us as children, especially too. But it was never, you know, it was a general thing that was magic about it. Or people, and later, of course, you know, the story went kind of naturally. So, you know, we grew older, so we found out, okay, you know, maybe it's not all that, or, you know, maybe things are a little different, and maybe the parents are involved or whatever. But it was never like somebody really, it did not feel like somebody deliberately tried to, you know, lull me into some kind of movie story to, you know, take advantage or whatever. But it happened really naturally. And when we kind of discovered and found that it was something else, so it was not like you know, a bad surprise or so, but it was nice. So I have good experiences with that, and with our children so far also. You know, it is something like I can see benefit in you know, building a story and you know, putting certain values in it as well. But at the core of it, it has to be, you know, people coming together in peace and you know, sharing good time and sharing loving relationships again around, you know, certain seasons or times of the year.
But certainly, like the Christmas story that gets told every year is this, like, you know, hysteria that goes on over some toy or computer or game or something that people will like rip each other's heads off for, because apparently that's somehow going to solve the problem that they weren't able to solve with everything else that they've done. So they'll wait outside a store for 12 hours to get a shot at punching somebody in the face for a you know, a plastic doll American, or something.
Though. Merry Christmas there.
No, wait, that's a very American scene you're painting there. I don't know. Is that happening in Mexico too, or just the States?
I don't know. Yeah, pretty much the States, I think. But, you know, it is that materialism, and that's certainly consumerism is one of the things that drives the economy that we have these days. And, you know,
which is that's based in growth, right?
I was going to comment on my history because before I met my husband, and actually a couple years after we were married, I was all gung-ho about Christmas and Santa Claus and the story. because I grew up in a household where it was like Christmas Eve, we had our routine. We'd sit down, we'd open one package, one present that was from the family, and then we all had to go to bed at a certain time to wait for Santa. And I'd always put out milk and cookies and carrots because we had horses, and I knew that the reindeer would also be hungry. So I'd leave out all these things, and first thing in the morning, I'd go and check it. And my stepdad, of course, had munched on all of the cookies. He'd probably eaten the whole plate of cookies, and my mom put out ones that she munched on to make it look like they were gone. And, the carrots would be nibbled on. There would be handwritten notes from Santa because I decided I was going to write Santa. I wanted to know. I started getting curious. I was like, I don't think Santa's real. But my parents told me that the second you stopped believing in Santa was when you stopped getting gifts. So I was like,
conditional.
Can I try to figure out if Santa is real? And they were like, well, I guess you can. So I wrote a letter, and this is how I found out that Santa wasn't real. I didn't say anything to my family. I just realized what it was because I recognized my mom's handwriting the next day. And she had told me that, sorry, can't see Santa. If I try to stay up and see Santa, if I try to catch Santa, and if I don't just believe that Santa doesn't exist for me anymore.
What is this whole thing? Just believe. So many things as a child you have to just believe. This calculus will be useful to you in the future. Just believe.
Yeah, just have blind faith.
I think that's an interesting tool, but go ahead.
I appreciate the magical aspect of it. I appreciate the fun I had. And I appreciated when I was let in on the secret. It wasn't sorry, I gotta tell you, Santa's not real. Hope your next Christmas isn't a bummer. I lied to you. It was all right, now you're an adult. You get to know the secret of Santa. So it was it was a communication thing to a certain extent. But I decided, whenever I decide to have children, that it's all gonna be a story. And I might, maybe I'll go nibble on the cookies if they try to leave them out. And see what they have to say. When they catch me, I'm gonna be like, you caught me. I'm not gonna there are people out there that continuously lie because they don't know how to transition you from that childhood fantasy into what is real life, and understanding why that childhood fantasy is necessary and it is helpful. There's not a lot of communication around that time when they find out. My husband found out the really hard way. He found Santa's wrapping paper in the closet, hidden behind some stuff, and he was furious. He was so mad.
But why do people perpetuate that tradition? Because it is lying to their children.
So there's
a disconnect there.
Cool entry from Tony. There. Hang on, I want to read the thing from Tony. Now, okay. Also, Shambhavi was answering us from earlier. She said that, yes, sometimes the masters would have physical punishments for the things. And then she said, when we were talking about Christmas, that magic and traditions are the wonder of life. And I think that would be cool to have Shambhavi on maybe one Wednesday coming up to talk about magic and traditions, because that's very interesting. And, that's what we were planning to do with our guest today. So I think that, traditions could be cool. Tony says that the whole Santa story was that what opened up his mind to the lies of the world. The night he found out that other people were telling him not to lie, were lying to him, he started acting out and questioning everything. So he blamed them, he acted out against them. But now he knows that it's not really truly their fault because it was part of the programming that they had to endure in their childhood. So
these are remnants of the early version of programming from societies prior.
Yeah, he says he doesn't think that they know what it does to children, but he learned a lot from it. It was
I don't think there's any harm. If I were to sit down and tell my children the story of Santa Claus, the story of Rudolph, and their whole little world, I'm not gonna get up and be like, okay, now you've heard the story of Santa Claus, now we have to go to bed because he's gonna come down the chimney and we got to put out some cookies so that he can have, I'm not going to perpetuate that. if they want to do that, I think that's precious. It's their choice to believe.
Well, isn't there a healthier way to go about this? Because I mean, it is encouraging materialism. It is lying. It's encouraging lying and potentially traumatizing your child. Why do that? Why can't we just come up with a much more creative tradition that delivers the magic that we want without having to harm their psychological
what about that elf on the shelf
understanding of the
thing?
world?
I hate that thing. I hate it.
That spies on you and moves. There was something creepy in Poland. So Santa Claus comes at Christmas and all of that. But on 6th of December, St. Nicholas, same but different. I was always confused whether it was the same person or not. But St. Nicholas comes by and he comes into your room and you're supposed to have your feet cleaned. And then, or shoes cleaned. Sorry, there was a weird ringing. You're supposed to come, have your shoes cleaned and put them at the foot of the bed. And then some strange man walks into your bedroom in the middle of the night and fills your shoes with candy. I mean, that's creepy, okay? And make sure your shoes are clean, because if your shoes are dirty.
Santa Claus and Saint Nick is creepy. Once I got older, I did not understand. I was why would I ever want a grown man shaking his belly in a jumpsuit, climbing down my chimney, who knows when I'm asleep, knows when I'm awake, knows what I do, knows when I've been good. Like, how does this guy know so much about me? Is he stalking me?
Okay, so that's one thing. This guy comes to the living room. Your dad's probably sleeping or your mom's sleeping in the next room. You're fairly safe. This dude comes directly into your bedroom. Like, he bypasses all the barriers and goes through the shoes are supposed to be at the foot of your bed.
And as a child who believes in magic,
much better now.
As a child who believes in magic.
In Germany, it's socks, isn't it? That you hang on the edge of the bed or something.
No, not where I'm. Like, we have the Christkind. It's actually an angel. It's a Christ child that comes. It's an angel, not with chimney and this and that. Well, at least not where I'm from. So I understand your trauma much better now. But I do. But you see, like, the way we have been really going, and I think that is really nice, which is, not telling lies in that way, but it's a story. And then, if they're old enough to kind of question the story, it's not like, I'm not going to insist on, making up a story, but I'm going to, answer back with another question. Or what do you think? But no, like, I'm going to make fun out of it, so then it leaves up to the imagination and to the stage of development also of her or of him, to kind of figure out, but I think it's really mom and dad is like, how are you sure? How does that come about? Like, I don't have bunny ears or, whatever it is, like for Easter or for Christmas. So it becomes like, somewhere in between. So they're not sure and they can figure out on their own. But at the same time, it leaves room. And that's what happened to me as far as I remember back, which is like to see that, maybe it's not according to the story, and that was never like really reinforced and with threat and so, but it's something, that was there and was some kind of like a magical atmosphere there. But then also it becomes, it's a development, because I can see, even if it's not all that, but wow, I can see the love, I can see the appreciation, that somebody has for me, making up all of that and going through the efforts. So that loving relationship right there, that was a gesture, like a loving gesture that I could feel, and it didn't matter again if it was, I don't know, like not the guy from the chimney, but like the Christ child or something else, because it was done with that caring and with that sense of love. So
how does the Christ child carry all those presents? Like if it's a baby, if it's like a newborn baby, how does he carry all the gifts?
Well, isn't it interesting though that like a lot of people put a lot of effort into making their child's Christmas special, but in the end it is actually kind of a traumatic event because they take this outside tradition that they don't know who came up with, incorporated into their life, and then have to go through all these things to purchase the gifts and all this kind of baloney.
Yeah, you're right. It was much better 100 years ago when the devil would, on what are those high shoes called? Stilts. Devil on stilts would walk past your window, wave, the whole parade, the devil, the Pope, all the scary things.
Mike, I was going to ask you something about the whole discipline thing, though, because you mentioned many times you were in the army and you have some rich stories to tell from that time back. And discipline is a big thing in the army. And Shambhavi, she brought up discipline and how important that is to her. And like we were talking about children, education, and discipline there. And for me, really, there's a difference, because you can force discipline. And you can be disciplined in a way that you feel you don't have a choice and you have to do it. Otherwise, something terrible happens.
I disagree.
But then if I look at Shambhavi mentioned, masters who will use discipline but that's kind of like the rule of the house. If you step in my class, in my training session or in my horde, in my capoeira horde, so there's a certain ritual, there's a certain discipline, there are rules of the house. But you still, you make the decision. You step in. If you're in the army, I figure like you made the decision to sign up. So it's like the rules. Or you find them out fairly quickly thereafter. But there's a choice, you can step out, you can leave the class, you can leave the church or the yard or, wherever you're stepping in. And so it's still a choice of you. But, and then another aspect I want to bring in is that, discipline really, if you don't need, you don't need to think about discipline when you get up in the morning, you wash your face or you tie your shoelace or, I don't know, you brush your teeth or whatever you do. That's something you just do because that's your rule and that's what you do every day. So nobody has to say, oh, you have to be disciplined. You have to, open your eyes and wash your face in the morning. But if it's something that drives you, if you have an inner drive to achieve something and you feel that, oh, I have to do ABC in order to get there, and you just do it, then for somebody else that might do, oh, that's a mad discipline you're doing. You're doing whatever, 20 push-ups every day. Whoa, what kind of discipline you have? But for you, that's like, oh no, that's my way of life. I love to do that. Like I don't feel good. Then my day is not my day. Like if I don't do 20 push-ups every day. So there are many really aspects of discipline. I was wondering how did you experience discipline in the whole setting in the context of being in the army?
Well, I think that in regard to like what people think of as discipline, it is we've got all these different situations in which people are kind of forced to do things against their will without any good reasoning, and because we kind of treat, or majority of society treats children as if they don't matter or they don't have their own mind. We create this circumstance where they have a poor point of view when it comes to what the effect of discipline actually is, because self-discipline is one of the key things that we need to do what we want, to carry ourselves where we want to go, to make the effort that we need to take on the challenges, to overcome the obstacles and stuff like that.
And we must mix it up with obedience, right? Obedience and self-discipline is like two hugely different things.
Right. Yeah, honestly, I feel like there's a book out there called Punished by Rewards, and I'm not sure what the author's name is, but he makes a very logical argument about why we don't want to reward, why we don't want to reward people, and why we don't want to punish people. It's really the same thing, and if we understand why that is logically a bad thing, then we start to see how life really is. And like when we discipline ourselves and encourage self-discipline in everybody, they actually benefit because they actually see the value in the things that they're doing, and so it's not like I'm working to get a paycheck. It's working because I love to work, or I get something from work because I feel valuable. I give that value to other people. I provide a service that makes people's lives better. All these things, because we create these circumstances where there's other things that we do things for, we really diminish the real value of why we do things. And that's really kind of like with raising children and stuff like that. I think it's so important that if you don't ever get off that path, they just figure that out by themselves. I remember when I was a kid playing in the sandbox and stuff like that, I loved going to work, man. I wanted to get out there, 7 o'clock in the morning. As soon as the sun was up, I wanted to be out in the sandbox, building my sand castles and using my Tonka toys and stuff like that. And, because that's what I wanted to do, and I saw the other people, we had a construction site across the street. So I got to see like real construction going on. And I that's what I wanted. I wanted to be like that, and that was just like me as a child without any influences. But then, of course, as you go through life and you go through institutionalized schooling and stuff like that, they're constantly switching the stuff up on you so that you lose that connection. I don't know. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I'm really glad you touched on discipline and punishment, because I think that's a word, discipline, that is misused. You can't discipline someone else. You're punishing them. You're punishing. That's what that word is. Discipline is something you do for yourself. It's self-discipline. Every time you're talking about discipline, every single one of y'all use positive words. It's encouraging. It's, self-sustaining. It makes things better. It gets you where you need to go. There's not many people who, when you switch that word over to punishment, you don't use encouraging words. They're not positive words. It's a negative experience. You're being punished for something. And I think that's a really big issue is, yeah, technically you're making your child disciplined out of fear.
Well, and that also gives, with the idea of punishment, it takes away forgiveness. And forgiveness is something that's really so important as well, because really forgiveness is for ourselves more than anything else. And the fact that we don't get to do that, because like if anybody does anything wrong that's against the law, they get punished and the government takes care of it, regardless if they hurt us or we forgive them. Well, it doesn't matter. They still get punished. They still get thrown in jail.
They're always labeled as a bad person. Like, you don't escape that. That's your punishment.
Have you guys heard about Maria Montessori?
Mm-hmm.
She has
to some degree.
She has some strong words on discipline, and I came across quotes from her. Would you want me to quote some of them?
Sure.
The undisciplined child enters into discipline by working in the company of others, not being told he's naughty. Discipline is therefore primarily a learning experience and less a punitive experience, if appropriately dealt with. And the next one is, at a given moment, a child becomes interested in a piece of work, showing it by the expression of his face, by his intense attention, by his perseverance in the same exercise. That child has set foot upon the road leading to discipline. I just think about your example there, Mike, that you just gave, in your childhood, sitting in the sandbox. And then the next one is, discipline must come through liberty. We do not consider an individual disciplined only when he has been rendered as artificially silent, as a mute, and as immovable as a paralytic. He is an individual annihilated, not disciplined. And she was really, at her time, like pioneering and going a whole new direction, working with children and attending to children's needs, and actually taking the child and letting the child lead in its own development. So she took a pioneer role in actually not telling the child what to do, but looking out for the child and helping the child in discovering the world. And I think that's like a whole episode by itself. But I found that was appropriate just a while ago, because she has some very interesting things to say about discipline, I believe.
Mike, you said something earlier along the lines of being punished for getting something wrong or making a mistake. Because obviously you wouldn't just be punished because you did something good. This I think leads to, hopefully there are those cases for sure, but hopefully that's not the case. It led me to think of another really big issue with this trust is we're not allowed to fail. Not as children. Like, if you fail a test in school, a lot of times you don't get to retake it. You don't get a second chance. You don't get a second chance to learn that information. You had your chance and you failed. And then you're punished for failing. Hopefully, supposedly to encourage you to work harder, but not everyone's brains work that way. Some people go the other way and they're like, I failed. I must be a failure. And there's this vulnerability around being wrong. I had it for a really long time. I still struggle with it because it's not something that just goes away. But it makes relationships so much harder when you have this fear of being wrong. And if you, even just towards someone who has never, been an asshole to you when you're wrong, that fear can still be there and keep you from trying. And I think that's a really big issue with adults, and it starts in childhood.
Yeah. Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, in regard to expectations, when it comes to things like failure, and especially if you're trained to consider yourself a failure, in a lot of relationships, people, just kind of look for the reason why it's going to fail, and it might be years and years in a great relationship, but as soon as that situation comes up, they're like, "Oh, I'm out of here," and
Yep.
lo and behold, and there's so many of those things that like society basically programs into people's minds.
Yeah, like a low self-esteem, right? That's it's difficult to develop a long-lasting, loving relationship if you can't love yourself, if you cannot fall in love with yourself and are not, firmly established in yourself and can accept the one that you are. And then how are you going to relate to in a loving way to somebody else if you cannot really and truly fall in love with yourself in the first place? That is I find. Yeah, go on.
I'll say it even pushes people the other way where they see a failure happen. It doesn't have to happen to them. Let's say they see someone else fail and someone get punished for it. That kid, if they're smart, is going to be like, okay, they failed. If I don't want to meet that fate, I won't fail. And then they start figuring out they go to extreme measures to make sure that they don't fail. And it's like pushing the other way where it's too much. You end up taking on too much, blasting your face with a fire hose of information, just trying to get a drink.
And isn't today like the approach of today the exact contrary to it, where you're not allowed to fail again, where everybody's a winner, regardless of what they do. Once they show up, they're a winner and they're first place already. So what does that do?
I think that's along the lines of just like the safety thing, where everybody is just safe. Is as long as they wear their helmet, as long as they do their like stay within their boundaries.
If people got a taste, just one taste of what it really felt like to be safe, they'd never be fooled again.
That's an interesting statement.
Because they don't feel safe. They're scared. Otherwise, they wouldn't feel the need to take precautions. Yeah. And so they can't recognize it. And a lot of times, when you present them with an actual safe place, it scares the living shit out of them. Because they're like, what is that? That's too good to be true. It's manipulative. You are trying to manipulate me. I've had that experience way too many times. I have thought that people in my life were at a different level than they were, and that's my misunderstanding. And I try to hit them with some like real knowledge of like what it's like to be in a safe relationship, what it's like to be in a safe relationship where you have good boundaries with your family members and your friends. And I often get accused of trying to manipulate them, trying to control their life, and trying to make decisions, because that's what it feels like when you have never experienced it. It's scary. Who do you trust? You got to figure that out. No, you can trust external people. Well, you have to be more careful.
I suppose you've got to learn how to trust too. You've got to establish a process of learning how to trust. This is something I've asked a lot of people, and for the most part, they don't know how to develop trust or how to recognize who they should trust versus who they shouldn't trust, and what's the distinguishing characteristics that's the difference. All that stuff is out the window. I think this is another thing that starts with the artificial, you know, substitutes of things like TV characters and stuff like that. All the people that they follow are essentially two-faced. So there's no level of trust when it comes to television celebrity stars and all the characters and all their favorite movies and stuff like that, because they're all going both ways. And so there's no trusting them. But in a real relationship, it can be developed. And unfortunately, most people don't have that anymore.
To me, there is no doubt really that there is a war by certain powers on loving relationships in our world. And I sincerely doubt that we have experienced a day where that was not being waged since the day all of us were born. And that war, if you look close at it, you can, it's easy to see that it's a war being waged on our loving relationships with our partners, with our families, with our community, with our children, and ultimately also with the divine, which is also a relationship. And that for me is like a key. That is the foundation, really. Is the relationship, how you relate to whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, the divine, because that is the basis for everything else, for every other relationship you have right there. If you don't have that established, then you just, you'll be like the ship, being blown by the wind wherever it goes, but without really steering and without really being centered in your true self. And yeah, and there's solutions certainly to all aspects, as I love to look at things holistically, for emotionally, physically, from a social point of view. There are solutions to all of that, but also like key to it is to recognize that somebody is trying to to split, to put something in between you and other people and between you and your true self. And it's then up to you to determine, to be aware of that, and then to take measures. And I think we have been touching on quite a few, and there's certainly more. And but maybe we were able to bring some light and to give some encouragement, and also maybe give some ideas to our audience. And I hope it was valuable to all of you. And there's certainly solutions, and there's many ways to deprogram yourself from that program that we all, I believe, have been influenced by. And a nice quote from Khalil Gibran, which I love to quote, is, "I existed from all eternity, and behold, I am here, and I shall exist till the end of time, for my being has no end." So that is comforting to me, because that also means that, if that has no end, if that being is here, was here, will always be here, then there's also an opportunity of having a loving relationship with that right now and right here. Depending on nobody else, just depending on my own, effort and discipline, maybe, and trust that I have in myself, in my own capacity and capabilities in this life.
I think it's amazing how we only covered maybe a third of the material that we were planning to cover, and the hour and a half has gone by so fast that we haven't even gotten to half of it. But maybe we'll do another episode on this in the future, because it's an interesting topic.
I have a quote that Heather just shared on Facebook, but since we were talking about forgiveness, I thought it would be appropriate. So this quote says, "Forgive yourself for not knowing better at the time. Forgive yourself for giving away your power. Forgive yourself for past behaviors. Forgive yourself for survival patterns and traits you picked up while enduring your trauma. Forgive yourself for being who you needed to be. And I'd like to add that now you can be who you need to be now. Like, you don't need to be that person anymore. And I think something holding us back from trusting ourselves and trusting other people is we have to forgive ourselves for being duped.
Yeah. On that note, I think we should say good night to our lovely listeners. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, whatever it is. And maybe come back on Wednesday. What do you guys think? 2:30 in the afternoon Pacific? You think that's a good idea?
We've got a pet. What's the title of the
Pet
show
food
on
remedies?
Wednesday?
Let me just double check here. It
Alternative
is
pet food.
Healing Lessons from Your Pet.
Ooh.
Yes.
Thank you very much to our audience for the comments and input, steering us along and giving live feedback. That's really encouraging all the while. Thank you.
And yes,
Absolutely.
and we love our listeners. And also Shambhavi, I would love to hear more about magic. Very interested in magic these days.
Me too. Me too.
So, anyway, she sent a heart, so I had to blow her a kiss.
Aw.
So, on that note, I'm going to play the outro and we're going to say goodbye and adieu until Wednesday when it's Healing Lessons from Your Pet. Good night, everybody. Goodbye. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye. Gute Nacht.
Bye.